Okay, so we're back for another desk job. I've got to turn a bunch of things on here and put our valued subscribers up in the background there. In any case, today we're working on a small desk job. Is the release system for my Air 2S, which is on charge somewhere. Let me find it. Alright, it was over on the charger, not charging. And this is why we have to fix it. I bought this like 3 years ago for my drone, which very recently got stuck in a tree. So I retrieved it eventually, but in the meantime I purchased a new drone, which cost me only marginally more than my flyaway insurance would cost me, which didn't cover my drone because they only cover you for up to 2 years. So what we end up with is a situation here where this no longer turns on or off or charges. It's been used maybe once or twice in that entire 3 years. The little tiny 150 milliamp battery in here is probably shagged. So we're going to crack it open and see if we can put a new battery on it. This appears to be glued, so I think we're going to do some destructive opening and see what we can do. Now I'm going to use my favourite tool, the name of which I got from Big Clive on YouTube here, is a spudger. These things are cheap but incredibly useful. First one of these I ever used I got from Tinkerman Mick, although I think he's rebranded as Stiffy now. But you can find him on YouTube. So this is glued on relatively well. I need to find a way to get in here and pry it open. So I may investigate this briefly off camera, or I may stick it on the end of the bench and hit it with a hammer. We'll see what happens. I'm going to attempt the percussive maintenance option. Now we don't want to damage the switch. I'm going to hang it off the edge of the bench here with the switch and the I/O hanging over the edge. And I'm going to try and just crack that glue bond just a little bit. Get a little bit here. Sometimes that will pop a glue bond. It'll fracture it just enough that you can get in, which looks like we have here. We can see that little seam just popping out. I'll give it a couple more whacks and then see if we can get it in there. Now, this did allow us to get the spudger in. Now, this can usually bugger it up, but at this point it's either fix it or buy a new one. And so the risk of buggering this is limited. Now there is a board in there. I don't want to pry too much because I might bugger the board up. Some of you long-time viewers will remember me doing that to a remote control and having to go to great efforts to fix that once. So we don't go in too deep here. We will try and pry up. They have definitely glued this together well. Okay, we have progress. It appears that they mostly glued this just in the corners in a couple of spots there, and these did have little locking lugs, I think, at some point. In any case, that will glue back on just fine with a bit of cyanoacrylate. And now we can get into the board, which is a pretty basic board, and this is a tiny little battery here. And yeah, very bulgy. I probably have something similar to this kicking around. A couple of little BMS board on there somewhere, but I probably have something like this. Let's dig through my spare parts kit and see what we can find. So I don't have much by way of these batteries. I used to have a bunch of itty bitty batteries in my collection for the little cheap drones you can buy everywhere, but that battery doesn't actually seem as bulgy as it is. I could rob a battery out of something like one of these little units. These are very nice little torches, very cheap. That's a 3.7 volt 0.5 watt hour. It's 150 milliamp hour. And that is the same as the battery rating that's supposed to be in these things. We can have a quick look in here. Yeah, it's supposed to be 150 milliamp hour battery, so that's about the same capacity battery in that. So we might be able to find something at the local cheap shop, like the dollar store or something like that. What I might do is stick this down and check the battery volts. Okay, we have ourselves a multimeter here. We're going to probe the B pulse and B minus, and we got El Zilcho. So that battery might have gone into sleep of death, because the BMS is on the battery itself, and so that might have just gone to sleep and never to wake up. I could probably jump start that battery, because there is access to the terminals there. I could put a resistor and put probably 4 volts into it or something like that and see if I can wake it up. I do like the idea of replacing the battery though, but this one doesn't seem too bulgy, so it might be okay. So you know what, I think what I might do is take the tape off that battery, the Kapton tape there. I think I've got some spare stuff somewhere, and see if we can jump start the battery. Okay, so we have the Kapton tape removed, and we're just going to check our cell voltage here before we jump start it. Oh, we've got a little bit there. We've got like a 0.3 volts in there. 0.03. So even on this side of the BMS, that battery is shagged. It's not even like 2 point something volts or 1 point something volts. It's 0.03. That battery's dead. Not even worth trying to jump start that. So we might go and see what else we can find from the local shops. I have a mate, or at least I know a bloke I've known for many years, who runs an electronic shop. We should be able to find something from there.
72 hours later.
Alright, so a couple of days later, in fact a whole weekend later, I took this down to my local electronic shop. They gave me one of these guys, which I hope is the same voltage. This is a single pack, I assume, so it's probably 3.7 volts. It's around a 3.7 volt, 0.81 watt hour, which should probably do the job. So we'll attach that in, and pretty sure this one has the BMS built into it anyway, so I don't need to rob the BMS off that one. Alright, we'll check battery volts here. Now I am going to cut the plug off this. It goes without saying that if you cut a plug off something like this, cut one wire at a time. Don't just chuck your cutters across the whole thing, because you'll short it out. More inches, I'll give us about that. I need a bit to... Whoa! Now we are, I think I saw about 4 volts there. 4.1 volts, so we're pretty good. That is charged. Okay, we're going to cut the leads off. We're going to separate these out like that, and we're going to do one at a time so that we don't have some fireworks. There we go. Okay, we're going to need solder station. We need a little bit of solder, and we're going to want to do outlet fan for some fume extraction here. Bring you down there. Now I'm going to do one little thing here. I'm only going to strip one wire at a time, because when I'm soldering them on, I run the risk of shorting them out. And this is silicon cable, it's very easy to strip, not likely to damage the board when I do it. Now I did leave a little tail of the existing coloured wire on here. Let's zoom in a bit. So I left a little bit of the tail of the existing colours, even though it is already marked on the board, for a couple of reasons. One, it helps me remove the tail off when I desolder it, and it also helps me know what the positive and negative wires were, just as a bit of redundancy. We're going to tin the iron here with a little bit of solder. I'm going to grab with a pair of tweezers here, and I'm going to lift off the board, and we have confirmed that B plus and B minus are actually negative and positive. I've seen cases where that is not actually the case. So let's tin our wire over behind the field of view here, and we'll spin our camera around because you won't be able to see through my hand. Let's take our negative, well, that's positive, so let's take our negative wire here, and we will tack onto here. There we go. Now we will do the same for the positive. Okay, now we're going to tin the positive after we have stripped it separately. I do like working with silicon wire, it's much easier. Now we're going to use my hand here. You may not be able to see what I'm doing, but it should work nonetheless. Being careful not to let this hot wire touch stuff that it shouldn't, or the soldering iron to accidentally breach contacts. Alright, we're on. Now let's find ourselves a charge lead. Okay, initial little test. We get a light now. Now what I probably need to do here is reassemble slightly, and then we'll do a proper test. Right, we have things reassembled with a bit of tape just to keep the stuff steady until I commit to gluing it down. We have reattached the light sensor, which I'm going to shove my thumb over. I'm going to turn this on, and hopefully if I open this it should release. But let's put a really bright light in there. Oh, it worked. Alright, it's working. Let's see if it charges without blowing up. Okay, we're going to turn on our test supply here, which also, this little box here, when I turn on 12 volts from the house battery, also runs a 5 volt regulator for this, which means I can plug this in here, and we should see a charge light now, which we weren't before. So the battery was definitely knackered. So what we're going to do, we're going to turn this off, and we are going to commence re-gluing just ever so slightly, just a little bit of glue, in case I have to do this again. Makes it easy to get it off. Alright, we're going to glue the top back on. Now the trick I'm going to use here is a trick that I used for quite a long time with hearing aid repairs, which is to use a pin to apply just very small amounts of super glue, also known as cyanoacrylate glue. I'm just going to apply it just a tiny little drop to each corner, and we will go and put a little bit in each corner there. Make sure we get this in the right orientation. We're going to flip over, insert and hold for a few seconds, and then let it sit for about an hour. Alright, with that we're fully charged. We've turned green, which means end of the video. But glad this was a simple fix. It was just a battery, nothing more complicated than that. Anyway, we'll see you in the next one, and hopefully it's another interesting one for you.